Good morning everyone, it's Peter from Marsh Apiaries. Just ignored a lump in my eye. I haven't been stung. I've got a blocked tear duct or something along them lines. I just wanted to come on quickly and answer a few questions. Because of my dyslexia, it's easier sometimes for me to make a video, so I hope that's okay with people. And you've got a couple of minutes just to listen. We've been asked a lot about swarms recently. We've been asked because of it being swarm season. We obviously get asked a lot about cutouts and why that's happened and what the process is. To cut a long story short, a swarm of bees is either come from a beekeeper's beehive because they've not got enough room, or the queens become to swarm, or sometimes you get bad DNA lines within beekeepers' bees and they become very swarmy because of their DNA line. There's two main reasons that bees swarm, and that's one, that the queen bee's got old, or two, the young queen that's in there just hasn't got enough room to lay, so they decide to swarm. And what they do is they send out scout bees to look for a new venue. When they've come up with a new venue, she'll then arrange it in herself, and the day at the right time that they decide to swarm, all the bees that she's taken with her will go and fill their bellies up with pollen, with nectar, with everything they need to survive for a few days. And then what they do, from a hive particular, and from my side of it, is they come rushing out the front door, up in the air they go, beautiful swarm of bees, and then they clear off. Or they might, if you're lucky, they might have a box that you've put up in your apiary and they clear off into there quite quick. That's the ideal situation. Most of the time it ain't that simple, but that's the ideal situation. So we quite often get calls to swarms of bees, and they're normally clumped on a tree, or on a fence, or in a BMW car. I had a photo there. And we pick them up before they get to their final destination. Now, I've done a video on this and a lot of people say, just leave them, let them carry on along their way. And I always say, don't do that. Get a beekeeper to remove them, because they could land in your chimney. They might have found a hole in your soffits and fascias, in your roof, in your wall, in a vent. And then you've got bees that have moved into the cavity of your wall, and they start building a hive pretty quick. So you then got a really big problem, and you have to get a company in to do a bee removal. It's not a 5-minute job. It's not a cheap job, and insurance pretty much don't pay. So that's why beekeepers try and pick a swarm up. Beekeepers don't earn off the bees. We don't get honey off the bees pretty much for the first season. That's 100%. So we've had to put a year into these bees. We've put them up into a hive. We've fed them for the year. If the queen DNA is really bad and they're spiteful and they're not greatly behaved, then no offence, but we are farmers at the end of the day. We have to knock the queen or freeze the queens, and then we give them new queens to keep the DNA line really good. So there's a lot goes into it before the beekeeper will ever produce honey from them bees. And a lot of beekeepers don't see that when they're picking loads and loads of swarms up. But that's the process. And then if they make it into a property, you've got a couple of £1,000 bill. And that's when you're cursing and thinking, well, I wish the beekeeper would have picked them up before they got to my house. So it is crucial that you give a beekeeper a call. One, you help pollinate your area, which is always good, because the bees stay in your area. And two, you're saving someone of quite a few £1,000. If we've missed it and they've got past that point of us picking them up as a swarm, they go into a building, they go into chimney breasts, they go into fascia cavities, into a tree in your garden, which is quite a big issue, into a shed, just into your kids' playhouse. There's a lot of places them bees can go. Now, as I said, that can be costly. The one we've done recently had moved into a little L box. Now, ideally, I'd have loved to have took that L box down, which is what we did. and I'd have loved to have took it to one of my apiaries and hung it back up and left the bees to do their own natural thing. The problem is, when I felt the weight of the box, it felt very full. The noise was immense, and it wasn't a big box. So the way that they were beaded out the front earlier on in the evening before we picked it up tells me that that box was very, very full. So it wouldn't have been long before the queen would have said, absolutely not. She was a young queen because we found her. I haven't got enough room, so she will do this thing. Send the scouts out. Scouts go out, and then she lays a queen cell. They produce their queen cell. She takes half the bees with her. You can end up with them in someone else's house, not too far away from where we picked the owl box up, to be fair. So it's crucial, you know, that we judge every situation differently. You know, a cutout on a house has got to be done for insurance purposes, if you want to sell your property and that. But an owl box, I could have left it like it was. But then we've got the aftermath if it decides to swarm and all of that situation. So we took it upon us as respectable people to take the bees out, and you will see in a photo there that the bee box was absolutely ram-packed with honeycomb and bees. Now, you know, on an ideal way, that would have been great. We would have just done a straight cutout, put it into a box. But obviously when you start doing your cutout, you start looking, and the queen must have been young, and wherever she was, she clearly didn't have enough room before. So she had swarmed. She was laying like a trooper. So 85% of that box, 90% of that box that was in there was all brood, so all baby larvae, and she was laying like a trooper. There was ricicles in there from that morning. So quite literally, she was running out of room, or gonna run out of room again, so it would have been a swarm process. But with that means that their stores wasn't amazing. So for their winter process, to survive the winter would have been really hard, because they only had a really thin band of honey stores. Their pollen wasn't a massive amount. Everything that we wouldn't want to put our bees through, they were in that bit of that situation. So us putting them into a hive now gives them time to build for the winter. We've put them into an area where the pollen's really, really good, so they can build up a lot of stores to survive the winter a lot better. As well, the box was, you know, it's not, some people would say they would survive. I would like to say that the box would be a little bit too cold for them over winter. So the chances of them getting right through the winter would be quite limited, I would personally say. So that's why we took to do the decision to put the bees into a hive. Now, obviously, what we've done by doing that is we've stopped that swarm process. I'm not overly worried that they're going to try and swarm on me. Queen plenty of room so she can lay now. Some new frames, so she'll be happy. She'll be as happy as Larry again, and she'll move on with us into next year. As well, the owl box, we could have, between myself and the people that do the bird protection across the marsh, we could have quite easily have got the plywood. I probably got some in the container and made a whole new box. And we did discuss this, but at that point there was no need to worry about making a new box, because it was just too tight in there. When we opened it up and we pulled it all apart and took it out, there was actually an owl's egg in there. So the bees had obviously pushed an owl out of the box, so that owl has had to go off and find another nesting area and lay more eggs, because there was no box for it, which for us is a big shame, because that egg could have possibly been fertile, and at that same time that could have been another animal or another bird across the marsh, which is a bit of a shame. But we've done it, we've got the situation under control. I hope that explains everyone's questions to how swarms work, and there is another video on swarms back on the page somewhere. So I hope that you can understand why we made that decision to take it out of that owl box. It's all for the welfare of the bees, and yes, if we had left it, it would have swarmed, which then means this late in the season for us that it doesn't give the bees in the box time to recover, because you've got a 40-day loss, slightly over, and the chances of the swarm getting a good bedding area was a little bit risky. And with the evening weathers dropping and the rain in the night time, if it had swarmed, then the outer layer, if it had rained overnight, would have died. So it would have become weak, wouldn't be able to survive, and possibly died off anyway. So your beekeeper can be your best friend with bees, and you can all support each other. So thank you for taking the time.